A gripping Las Vegas Grand Prix surprised almost everyone with a thrilling race. However, it was still the same outcome as usual, with Max Verstappen taking yet another win in 2023. Welcome back to the F1 Era, your weekly F1 catch-up brought to you by Nerve Podcast and Nerve Radio. I'm Eden Hannigan.
I'm Rebecca Coulson.
And I'm Honor Dench.
And we're still in our F1 era.
So, how did we all find Vegas this weekend? I know it was a bit mixed opinions, obviously, in our last episode, but now that we've watched it unfold, what are we thinking?
I quite enjoyed it. It was a little bit of a struggle for me to get through because I was ill over this weekend, so apologies because you may realise a change in the voice here because I am a bit struggling still, but it was a good race. I don't necessarily think it was as good as some people were saying that it was. I think a lot of people have been, I don't really know how to describe it, but I guess disenchanted with the fact that everyone thought, oh, this is going to kind of be a terrible race, and then with all the drama around it and things like that, but it turned out to be a good race because it was a good race at a track where people thought it kind of wasn't going to be all that. It suddenly became a great race, and there's a lot of debate about where it ranks amongst the street tracks now, and I'm like, it was a good start for Vegas. It could have got off to a better start, as we're about to discuss, but I definitely think that it was a solid first race, but I think some people are overhyping it.
I really enjoyed it personally. I'm gonna go out here and say I actually thought it was really good, because I think what you find with most races this season and last season as well is you've kind of got Max, he flies off into the distance and then gets like 10 seconds ahead for everyone else. And then you get a little bit of a stalemate in the midfield where the drivers can't really get past each other, and they're all just kind of stuck in the same order for like 10-15 laps. But what you saw in Vegas was constant overtaking in the midfield, and I really enjoyed that because I thought it made the race so interesting. And when you see these midfield drivers, it's so nice to actually see them overtaking each other rather than just being stuck in a straight line.
Yeah, and I think even though Max still won, the fact that we got to see him racing as opposed to like just driving, like you say, 10 seconds ahead of everyone else. It was nice to actually see him engaged in the race, having a bit of competition. The outcome may have been the same, but the build up to it wasn't, and that was more interesting.
Yeah, and I think we can obviously debate as well, had there not been a safety car, would he have actually won the race at all? So there is also that kind of element for it, but I'm sure we'll get into that just a little bit later on.
Yes, so Vegas may have been a very flashy race, but it didn't start off all too positive. Eden, do you want to take charge of this one as our Ferrari fan?
Yeah, so waking up on Friday morning, I was like, oh, let's check the practice results. I'm sure that we'll see Red Bull at the top. And then you get the notification through that the practice has actually been postponed, and it didn't start until, I think it was about 9 o'clock our time here in the morning. So we woke up, thought, what's happened? As we now know, the drain cover on one of the straights was basically sucked up by Carlos Sainz's car, damaged the Ferrari, and brought an end to practice 1, and practice 2 was delayed while they were putting concrete down the drain covers, which a lot of people thought was a interesting choice considering Las Vegas is a street track. It's not just for F1, so people are going to kind of have to deal with the concrete that they've put down in the drain covers. But Esteban Ocon had a damaged car from it because I believe he ran over it before Carlos Sainz, and then Carlos had a completely damaged car and had to take a 10-place grid penalty for all of the changes, which was very controversial. Like, I get it, and I get that the stewards couldn't do anything about it because of the rules, but it wasn't Ferrari's fault, it wasn't Carlos Sainz's fault, it was just a freak accident, and the fact that he had to take a penalty for that and Ferrari had to pay God knows how much for it. I mean, I know Ferrari have that kind of money, but it's just, it's a shame because it could have been a very good weekend for Ferrari had it not started that way, and had they not had to take a grid penalty because of, I guess, the track's mismanagement there and not understanding how the modern F1 cars kind of work with the, I guess, suction.
Yeah, you say it was a freak accident and that it was one of those things, but I just don't think there's any room for error in Formula One, especially with something that concerns the safety of the drivers. That could have gone a number of ways. Luckily it didn't. It still affected his race, which is incredibly unfair because it has absolutely nothing to do with any of the driving ability, any of the structural engineering of the car. It is to do purely with the lack of organisation from Las Vegas. I really don't think those things should be overlooked. They have other street circuits and these things haven't been a problem there, so why did we not adapt that knowledge and already fill them with concrete beforehand? Because I have seen that they do that in Monaco, so why didn't they do that before the race?
The whole weekend, the start of the weekend was pretty controversial when you think about during practice when they essentially kicked the fans out of the grandstands, the money they've paid for, kicking them out in the city that never sleeps, it's a little bit weird. And there was a whole controversy around, the fans wanting to get their money back. They felt like they'd been robbed in a way that they didn't get to watch practice. And there was a whole argument of they want to get the roads ready for the morning or something. Yeah, and it all seemed a little bit weird, but then as the weekend went on, the problems kind of subsided a bit and it became more of a professional kind of track, but it did definitely start off very, very rocky.
Yeah, in fairness, they fixed the problem very quickly and the whole race resumed to being like a professional event. It was just a very silly little thing to slip under the radar, especially on a street circuit.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Las Vegas, though, this isn't the first time, and I'm sure it's not the last time we've seen this in Formula One. We had an incident, I can't remember how long ago, but I'm pretty sure it was with George Russell while he was at Williams in Baku. There was also an incident, I want to say it was Malaysia at some point, with Romain Grosjean's car with a drain cover there. So it's not like it's a new issue, but when there's so much controversy surrounding the track already, it's just not really the best look to be having when immediately a car gets damaged to the point where they have to take a 10-place grid penalty through no fault of their own. And fair play to Carlos Sainz coming back in the race and finishing P6. As a Ferrari fan, you kind of sit here and think this could have been a better result had he not had to take that penalty.
I think that penalty was pretty unfair, actually. But you had, the F1 critics, you had F1 journalists saying that they really didn't think it was fair, they didn't understand it. And it's true, because a 10-place grid penalty for something which was out of his control seems a bit strange.
And definitely on a street track as well, where at the time we thought it was going to be very difficult to overtake too.
Yeah, I think it's a tough decision because they want to avoid the whole controversy of changing the rules for drivers, and I get that, especially with recent years, they really want to avoid that. But when there is absolutely no reasoning other than the way the track was built, or at least adapted as it was a street circuit, it's really unfair. I think there could have been like a slight adaptation to the rules because he wouldn't have needed that engine change had they not destroyed his car.
It did seem a little bit odd to wake up and read that, but...
And maybe as well, I think we could argue too that Carlos Sainz wouldn't have had as much a bigger factor in turn 1 collisions that we saw if he was further up the pack as he should have been, because obviously he qualified on the front row of the grid at that time. So does anyone want to talk about what happened on that one, try and make sense of it? We'll talk first about the chaos at the back. We may have differing views on what happened at the very front of the grid, so does anyone want to take it away and explain what happened to leave 2 cars facing the wrong way?
Yeah, so it seems quite tricky to unfold. We have watched the replay numerous times and we can't quite grasp where it all starts. I know Sainz lost grip and he made contact with Lewis Hamilton. Fernando Alonso was facing the wrong way. He spun. That caused, I believe, then Bottas to spin because he was then hit by Perez. So a lot of cars involved. We're not incredibly sure. We've read hundreds of articles, it feels like, and no one could quite determine the initial cause of that big collision. But it did mean that a couple of drivers had to change their front wings. Bottas and Perez? No, Sainz?
Perez definitely came in at the start because that was kind of the catalyst for his, monumental comeback through the field, although we'll again talk a little bit later on about why I think that Perez could have probably won that race had things kind of falling into his favour, maybe in qualifying. I believe it was Sainz facing the other way. I think it was Sainz and Alonso, and then Bottas kind of had nowhere to go when Alonso was facing the wrong way directly in front of him, so he just drove into the side of him and had to wait for Alonso to turn around so they could both get on with the rest of the race. I think that ruined Bottas's race because he ended up finishing 17th and last of the finishers and 35 seconds behind the next car in front of him. Ruined Bottas's race. Everybody else involved had a very, very good race. They all finished inside the top 10. So it was just kind of carnage really that we couldn't make sense of at the start, but it didn't really impact too many of the front runners from where they could have and maybe should have been.
You mentioned about how Perez maybe should have won that race. I mean, he is known the king of street circuits in a way that he really knows how to move the car to bring it to a good result. And I do feel like, even though I'm a Max fan, it would have been nice for Perez to kind of keep his title as being really good at street races, but it was just such an unfortunate incident. You get all these drivers spinning off into each other and you don't really know, there's nobody really at fault. It's just a kind of racing incident, everyone kind of flies off and distracts each other, and it's just quite unfortunate that he was caught up in that.
I think it's definitely a consequence of, not having qualified where you should in a car, that you should be qualifying higher up in the grid on the grid than. And Sergio Perez isn't the only person, which should be said, that is not a victim per se of that, but Hamilton, you could have argued, should have been getting through to Q3. Perez definitely should have been getting through to Q3. Sainz, as we've spoken about, is unfortunate to have been there. Yeah, you kind of make your own luck in Formula 1, they say. I would argue against that heavily for certain drivers more than others. Not naming names, but I think we all know who I'm referring to in the red car. You make your own luck, and I think when you're qualifying P13 or wherever he qualified in a Red Bull, I don't want to say you deserve what's coming to you, but you know you shouldn't be in the middle of the pack where you can get caught up in crashes from the midfield guys trying to fight for the best positions that they can get. So you really kind of look at Sergio Perez and think, you shouldn't be starting there, so why are you getting involved in all of this kind of chaos on lap 1? It's kind of his fault, but also, unfortunate for him because he is very good at street tracks and, like I said, should have won the race.
I think there's also the factor of when you've got such big names involved in a big collision in the middle of the pack, there's also the fact to take into consideration that it's the first ever Vegas race. Everyone wants their name in a history book. It's like a mass panic. The lights are out and everyone's like, oh god, it's the first ever race in Vegas, like I want to do so well. And then collision after collision, it felt like.
Yeah, you do get that vibe. I feel like, especially with all the criticisms of Vegas kind of over the weekend, I mean, I did find it quite funny about how Verstappen was just talking about the Vegas weekend, how he was never going to come back and how he didn't like it. And then he wins in an Elvis race suit and starts singing Viva Las Vegas. It wasn't the crossover we ever thought we were going to get. I did find that quite funny that his opinions on Vegas changed after a win. I do feel like every driver, they wanted to do really well. Vegas, it's flashy, all the attention's on it, there was loads of stars there, and you just want to do well, and that, you're right, that pressure can sometimes really get to you, and that may have been a cause of sort of a contribution to what happened.
That wasn't the only incident of lap 1, however. I know we've got a Red Bull fan and a Ferrari fan in the room. How do you guys feel about the controversy at the start of the race?
I'll let you go first. I want to know I want to know your defence of your driver, and I'm defending mine after.
Well, Max, he's a hard driver to defend sometimes. Some of his moves can be seen as, quite aggressive. I do feel like he's kind of this might not be the right phrase of words, but old-fashioned driver, You've always heard drivers like Senna say, if you see a gap, you go into it. And I feel like Max really does try to carry that through all his races. Maybe sometimes the way he goes about it isn't particularly right, but what do you think about that from Leclerc's point of view?
See, this is the problem that I have is, the thing is, Max Verstappen is known for this kind of driving, and we haven't seen it for a while because he's been out front leading races by 10, 20, 30 seconds at times. But every now and then he comes close to wheel-to-wheel racing with some people. And my problem is, when sometimes I watch Max do wheel-to-wheel racing, I always have to watch it through gritted teeth because I just know that he is one braking zone away from pushing another driver off the track. And there are some other drivers who I watch in this field and I think are kind of similar in that way. But the reason Max does it is because, generally speaking, he gets away with it. And I thought he was going to get away with it today because, or this weekend, because it was a lap 1 incident, and generally speaking, lap 1 incidents go unpunished. But it's a tough one because, I look at it and I think, well, that's the exact same move he did in Austria in 2019 when he won and Charles got second, and Charles should have won that race if that was a 5-second penalty then. I look at it and I'm like, yeah, a 5-second penalty is justified because that is the kind of penalties they give out for situations like that, but it just didn't have an impact on the race. It didn't in part because it's the safety car that came out for an awful time for Charles Leclerc and Ferrari. I just look at it and I just think, that's not going to make a difference, so you may as well just kind of let him get away with it rather than just give a penalty, because it's like, everyone's going to complain if we don't give him a penalty for that. I guess it's consistent, but it's just not going to make that much of a difference. And people say maybe he should have had to give that place back, and I look at it and I do compare it kind of in a way to how MotoGP and the motorbikes work, because in MotoGP, if you do a dodgy overtake on somebody and the stewards look at it and think, not so sure about that, they'll tell you to drop a position, and then for anything a bit more severe, they might give you a 5-second or a 10-second penalty equivalent. So I look at it and I think, yeah, I guess it's consistent, and we complain a lot about the FIA being consistent with penalties, but it just didn't make a difference, and it was never going to make a difference. But we got to see good racing between the two of them. It's probably the first time, I think, since Jeddah last year, that we got to see them race each other properly. And it's weird again that it's come on a street circuit and a night race, no less. It wound me up watching it at 6 a.m. in the morning, but I don't really think that there was much else that Charles could have done, because Max just ran him off the track, for lack of a better way of describing it.
I mean, I won't sit here and say that the penalty wasn't justified, because I do feel like, much as I like Max, sometimes his moves are a little bit bold, and you sit there and you think, well, what are you doing? You are going to get a penalty for that, like, you realise. And I think he did realise it as well. I think he said on the team radio something like, oh, tell them I said thanks or something. So he knew he was going to get a penalty, and he just accepted it. But I do feel like if you don't go for the move, then you don't really know what's going to happen. And it is so nice seeing Max and Charles race each other. They're such young drivers, and they've got such massive careers ahead of them. And if they could be racing alongside each other this close, through next season as well, I think it will be an incredible watch.
I mean, it may not be nice for either of you to hear this, but as a sort of neutral bystander in the room, I honestly thought it set the tone for a good race. I know it started and it wasn't necessarily the best start for one of you, but and as controversial as it may be, I just think it set the tone for a race and sort of said that this is going to be a race where there's going to be a good battle, there's going to be a good fight, there's going to be a bit more contention than there normally is. I wish my driver was up there too, but we didn't have the car for that, so I thought it was at least interesting to watch, sort of set the precedent for a good race and an interesting race, because sometimes with Formula 1, when you get a race with no collisions, no controversy, it can be quite boring to watch, and sometimes those little events, as horrible as they may be for one fan and as great as they may be for another fan, they are at least interesting to watch and watch them unfold.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I also think, though, as well, it's a shame that we didn't get to see it for the duration of the race because of the safety car. And I'm stuck on the safety car because, as we know later in the race, it came out for an incident between Max Verstappen and George Russell. There was debris from, I don't actually know which of the cars it was. I believe it might have been Russell's.
Yeah, I think it was Verstappen's, because he had to get his front wing changed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Russell ended up with damage on the floor of his car. I think he had to. But actually, no, I don't think Verstappen changed his wing. I think part of his wing fell off. But I believe they just continued the race kind of with a loss of aerodynamics, because he was already in a position where they knew he was going to be out the front of the race anyway, and they just accepted it as a kind of, we'll just go with it.
Yeah, I looked at the debris on the track, and I know for safety reasons for the marshals at the track, I don't want to say you have to throw a safety car there, because I think a virtual would have been fine. I think a virtual would have cleared up the debris there. It might take a couple of laps, but I think that would have been enough. But the fact that the safety car was introduced then, and everybody was able to pit again, but Charles Leclerc had come out on 5-lap-old tyres. By the end of the race, we saw the clear difference between him and the two Red Bulls, and it's a shame that because of, again, very unfortunate timing, and you just kind of have to look and see, when is he going to get a break? When is Charles Leclerc going to finally get a break and get that kind of win, get the consistency through, I guess, luck.
You can't really talk about a safety car without mentioning, these sort of cheap pit stops that you get under the safety car. And there's obviously a lot of controversy around people who pit under the safety car have an advantage when it finishes, and if you pit right at the end of the safety car, then you've kind of missed out a little bit. And there has been that whole discussion over, should drivers actually be allowed to pit under the safety car, and have these cheap pit stops where it doesn't really affect their race, but they come out on better, fresher tyres.
Well, sometimes it's a strategy. I know, forgive me because I can't remember the race, but it was one time that Lewis Hamilton said that our strategy was to race for as long as possible and hope for a safety car and a cheap pit stop then, and it's sort of one of those things that's actually incorporated into the strategy and plans for the race now. So perhaps it's one of those things that stays because every driver's plans around it, but also it's such a risky thing to plan. I know Formula 1 is a risky sport, but to plan your strategy for the race around someone potentially crashing out and causing a safety car collision in the lap that you hope it will happen in, it's a risky move because it could happen too early or it could happen too late.
Or it could be a virtual safety car.
Yeah, or it could never happen.
Never happen.
Yeah. I think to combat all of this, especially now they're safer that we don't do refuelling pit stops, we should bring back the old 2008 format where you can't basically pit under the safety car, although that could potentially bring back another crash gate. That's the danger we have. That's the danger we have. However, I would like to think that enough of the teams in this sport and enough of the principals and drivers have integrity to not do that. But yeah, exactly. I think it's a fine line there, judging the morality of people in a very high class rich man sport. But
I think a he turned into me would be very present if we brought back the no pit
yeah,
stop.
definitely. But I do sometimes look and I think, how is this okay? Because there was a lot of borderline unsafe releases as well that we saw this weekend, and we see that every so often where we do get a safety car and a bunch of people think, oh, now it's my time to take advantage of that and jump in the pits and change tyres and things like that. So it could be a solution, but I don't think that will happen, and I think something would have been done already when they introduced the virtual safety car to kind of cut down on pit stops if they were going to do that. So I do think that we're kind of going to have to live with the fact that some people will just get an advantage and it all relies on luck, which is kind of not a very good thing when you know that your driver is one of the most unluckiest people. I'd go as far to say in the history of the sport, but I think that might be a little bit be an exaggeration, but I didn't think he was going to win this weekend. But it's a shame that we didn't get to see a battle between two Red Bulls and a Ferrari because of... It could have been two Red Bulls and two Ferraris, but we didn't get to see it because of horrific bad luck striking the prancing horse yet again.
Talking of luck, George Russell has come out since his collision, and he's obviously taken full blame for it, as has Toto. But he said that this season is just one thing after another. I think when you have a fast car, luck is always on your side, and when you're on the back foot, luck is never on your side, and that this is just the story of our season. What do we think about that? Because I don't necessarily agree with his statement on luck. I think you can have a fast car, but as we can look at the Ferraris and think that luck is really never on their side, even though they do have a fast car. We do get, as Mercedes, get some luck, even though we don't have a fast car. So I just don't think it was really a fair statement.
I feel like that's a little bit... I do agree with you, it's not a fair statement, because you think that, well, if Mercedes are so unlucky, then why has Lewis been doing well in some races where, George hasn't? And this isn't by any means an attack on George and his racing ability, because we've seen in Williams that he has got incredible racing ability, and he wouldn't have got the Mercedes seat if he didn't. But I feel like when you're in that position where you're saying, yeah, but luck isn't on our side, but you've seen in the case of Lewis that luck can sometimes be on your side, it does bring up that question.
Also, I think last season, when luck definitely wasn't on Mercedes' side, Lewis dedicated at least the whole first half of the racing season to making changes to that Mercedes car. He was the car who had all the experiments, he tested different things for the teams, he helped them decide what's best. I think it was fair that it was Lewis that did that. George, it was his first season with the team, let him have his moment. I'm not sort of saying that he should have been the one to have that. I'm just saying that luck is sort of something that everyone it's a word that everyone throws around in Formula One, and I think it isn't to do with the speed of your car. That's, a huge advantage, but it's also to do with the structural integrity of the car, the benefits of the car, your driving ability, your strategy, all these things come into play. I don't think it's saying, oh, well, if you have a fast car, you're lucky, and if you don't have a fast car, you're not lucky.
Yeah, definitely. I also think as well it kind of goes back to that whole thing of, bad luck is having a car that consistently doesn't work properly and consistently breaks down. Although you could argue if it breaks down every other race, then what are you doing kind of when you're testing all of the new parts of the car? But if you have, say somebody like Charles Leclerc, his breakdown in Bahrain was bad luck. Him spinning out of Imola last year in the rain, that's not bad luck. That's down to the driver. Yeah. And the strategy mistakes that we've seen from Ferrari, like for example putting the hard tyres on when everyone knew they didn't work in Hungary last year, that's not bad luck. That's down to the team mismanaging the strategy. So there are different factors that come into play when it turns into luck. Qualifying, sometimes it can be lucky. It depends on conditions. It depends on potential gremlins that could come and disrupt the car when you're on a good lap. But I think sometimes you make your own luck does definitely come into play, but I do think Mercedes are kind of, I don't want to say covering their own backs a little bit and saying that they don't have the back, they kind of have bad luck, but they are definitely, I guess, compensating for something, I think is what I would go for there.
Yeah, for sure. And also Toto Wolff said at the end of the race about the George Russell collision, he said that it summarises the season, you make your own luck in Formula One. And I just think, okay, fair enough, you do make your own luck, but part of that is making a good car. And if he can register the fact that we need to make our own luck, why isn't he, as team principal, registering the fact that we need to make a good car? Because it isn't, this is the second season now where Mercedes haven't achieved what they should be achieving. I think we came away from the controversy in 2021, and any other team would have sat there and gone, we need to get that win, we need to do right by our driver, we need to justify it. And we fell off. We came away from that, which was probably one of the biggest controversies in Formula One. We came away from it weak. We came away from it without a fight. We had nothing. We looked like we might as well have been a backfill car. It was awful, and it was really, really embarrassing. And I think they did incredibly wrong by Lewis by not building a car. But I think they've had 2 seasons. They knew that first car didn't work. Why did they then produce a car in a second season that still didn't work? Where are our engineers, and what has happened since the W13 to produce this?
It is very frustrating. I think when you look at the history of Mercedes as well, they've been very strong, and Lewis he's got a number of championships with them as well, and you just think it's really frustrating to see that they're not doing as well, especially after, as much as I don't like to admit it, there was controversy in 2021, and it did hurt Mercedes as a team. And it's amazing that Lewis has actually stuck by them through this and actually shown support for them and the cars that they're building. And I do feel like they are going to come back a stronger team. And you see it in sports all the time, people do really well and then they fall off a bit, and then they come back, and they come back even stronger and even better than they were before. So we can only hope that that's what's going to happen to Lewis and Mercedes.
Would I be right in saying as well it's the first year since Lewis has actually been at Mercedes that they might not win a race if they don't win in Abu Dhabi?
He didn't win last year. It's the first.
No, as in Mercedes as a team, because Russell won at Brazil last year. So I believe that might be the first season since 2013 that they've not won a race at all in a season, which is bad. I mean, it doesn't reflect too badly when you realise that there's only been one non-Red Bull winner. That's the solace that Mercedes can take in that, but it's not looking particularly great. And one of the things that I always look at, and I think, could that have played a part, is I guess the eventual stepping back and then departure of James Vowles, who is now at Williams. And Williams are now obviously doing exceptionally brilliant things. The race result this weekend isn't exactly what they would have hoped for after a really, really good qualifying for them. But I look at that and I think James Vowles was a massive part of Mercedes' success, and now he's off doing other challenges and other good things and sharing his luck. And I think maybe did they not replace him very well? So that's always something that Mercedes need to kind of look at. They need to look at the things internally before they go around saying kind of like, oh, we make our own luck and things like that, and really just take a look at themselves and think, okay, we said in 2021 we're going to come back better than ever, and yet it's not happened yet. And it might take a while, after Red Bull won the 4 championships in a row with Sebastian Vettel, it took them, how many years is it between 2013 and 2021? I think it's 8 years, isn't it? 8 years, 9 seasons to kind of get back to being a championship winning car. And it might be a very long road for Mercedes, but they need to kind of take the time to have a look and hope that they can. I hope that they can find the solution, because it's not very fun supporting a team that was so good for so long and now has really lost the way. And you don't really want to be and you don't really want to have 2 top teams that you look at and think they can't win a championship, so we're going to just have to stick with the one that is constantly winning everything at the moment, because that doesn't make a fun racing series.
I do think Mercedes will come back. I think whether that's because we need a shuffle with the team in terms of the behind the scenes team, not necessarily the drivers, but whether we need to change around some of our engineers. Do we need to bring new people in? Do we need to bring old people back? Maybe that would be a good move. But I just think Toto Wolff was so adamant he would do right by Lewis, and he hasn't so far. To put it simply, he hasn't. He keeps saying, and he keeps supporting Lewis, and he keeps saying that he will do right by him. But I don't think he showed enough aggravation at what happened in Abu Dhabi. I don't think, as a team principal, he did enough. He could have gone against it. He could have stood up for Lewis more. He could have just gone back to the factory and helped out more and gave some orders and some team and leadership. But he didn't. I think he's all bark and no bite, really. I think he said a lot, but I don't think he's done enough. Now, we have one more race left of this 2023 Formula One season, and that will be... I know, I can't wait for it to end. And that is going to be in Abu Dhabi this Sunday. How are we feeling ahead of the race?
It's a tough one because the thing I have with Abu Dhabi is I really like the way the track looks. I think it looks beautiful with the blue and, you know, the hotel over the top of the circuit. It looks really nice, but the fact is the racing there is just not up to par with how the track looks, and it's a shame because I do like the look of the track, but it makes even championship battles boring. You know, 2021, I don't care what people say, like, oh, you know, because about the championship and whatever, but the race itself was boring. Like, let's get one thing straight, the race was not particularly good until we had
sweating that whole race.
Yeah, I collapsed at the end of it. My knees gave way. It was the most traumatic moment of my life. The only thing Abu Dhabi gives me is PTSD. No, just kidding. I cried.
Definitely cried.
They even managed to make a four-way title battle in 2010 boring. Like, you know, the battle between Sebastian Vettel, Fernando Alonso, Mark Webber and Lewis Hamilton, they made that boring, and it's purely because there's nowhere that you can overtake on that track. Like, Fernando Alonso couldn't get past Vitaly Petrov in a Renault, and he was in a Ferrari. Like, I just don't like the track, and because there's nothing to play for, like, nobody's going to take any extra risks. I don't think there's too much change happening ahead of next season either. It's just...
The best thing about the Abu Dhabi track is that they do donuts at the end and there's fireworks.
Yes, exactly. There's just nothing, especially when the championship's been wrapped up for God knows how long now. It's been, you know, there's no excitement. The battle is for Mercedes P2 and P3 in the constructors between them and Ferrari, and then P4 and P5 between Aston and McLaren. Who cares? I'm sorry. I know it means a lot to the teams, and the teams care, but we don't care. Like, it's not a compelling thing for us to really be watching out for. Like, it just feels like a nothing race. I say this and I now look and I think, oh, this is interesting because Carlos Sainz and Fernando Alonso are level on points going into the final race.
Okay.
If that was a championship battle, that would be great. That would be wonderful to
Alonso
watch.
winning a championship again.
Yeah, in an Aston Martin, no less, too. The Sebastian Vettel fan in me would be crying, though. But there's just nothing to really look forward to. Like, there's a few things that you think, oh, this could be interesting, but ultimately, everything's done. There's nothing to look forward to. So when, like, the sun sets and we've had 5 or 6 laps or so, generally we're going to know how the race is going to finish. It could surprise. It could potentially have a couple of moments, but I just don't see it doing anything. And we already know the outcome of the season. Max Verstappen's a champion, Sergio Perez is second, Lewis Hamilton is going to finish third. So there's nothing that's going to change. Nothing's going to change, and Abu Dhabi is just... it's there again. It's just it's a nice scenery to finish the season on. Let's get one thing straight. I'm very partial to a night race. I do love a night race, but it's just not exactly the most exciting season closer. So
I personally really like Abu Dhabi. I'm just going to jump in and say that I do really like it. I mean, I could be biased because I always pick it on the F1 game, but I personally, I do like it. I like the way the track's laid out, and I do feel like it can sometimes bring quite interesting close racing. It does really depend on kind of what you've got. Obviously, there is no championship battle this year, and that does make it a bit dim. And you do know that, Max is going to win. And I'm very happy that he has won the championship. But it would be nice for it to kind of go down to the final race. But I am excited to see kind of what happens, especially with the midfield kind of being as mixed up as it actually is. If we can get some really good sort of overtakes in there, at least for half of the race, it would definitely, hopefully, go up in your ratings.
I do think it's quite a nice race in the sense that I feel like it's the Sunday of Grand Prix. It's at the end. It's a nice, quiet little race. It's a bit like, not much necessarily happens, but it's nice. It wraps up the whole season and it just finishes it off on a quiet note.
And everyone goes as well. All the family goes, all the wags go, everyone's there. And it just feels like a bit of a party to end the season on. It's like you've got a Monaco party, you've got a Las Vegas party, and now you've got an Abu Dhabi party. And it does feel quite nice. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's the Sunday, but you just don't have the existential dread of the Monday coming up following it. Really.
Sunday scaries.
Unless obviously you're taking part in the post-season test. But I mean, that's mainly the young drivers.
Yeah.
I think everyone remembers when Fernando Alonso qualified as a young driver, despite being 38 years of age when he came back to the sport. But I like the ambience of Abu Dhabi. I think that's definitely something that needs to be said. I don't think it's one of the worst tracks. I just when you grow up watching Interlagos as the season finale, and then you change it to Abu Dhabi where things happen. Not very often, but things happen. You're kind of just like, damn. But it's not a bad track. Like I said, I like the blue. I like the way it's laid out. But racing wise, yeah, I'm not really sure. And also, it's just the end of a very long season. It's the end of another season where I couldn't tell you what happened in half of the races at the start of the year. Like, I look at, just to say, I look at Miami. What happened in Miami? Imola was cancelled. I was about to say what happened there. It got cancelled. It didn't even happen.
I mean,
Barcelona.
I think I could be quite confident in saying I think Max won. I don't know what race we're talking about, but if I was to guess, I imagine I'd be right.
Yeah, I've been flying this season. I've loved it. Me and my dad having a party.
At least that makes one of us. But yeah, this we complain about the season getting too long. This definitely feels like a season that's been very, very long, to the point where, like I said, I just can't remember what happened in half of the races. Normally there's at least one event in one race that makes me go, yes, I remember that, but I'm just scrolling through the list of races now, don't remember what happened in half of them. So I'm just going to say that it's glad that the season's coming to an end. It's been a very tough one. It's been a hard watch to see Red Bull dominating every single race by however long, and then like when it's not Max, it was Checo, and then we had the one race where it was Carlos Sainz, and I'm sitting there like a bitter woman, like, why is it not Charles? Why is it not Charles? This Ferrari win should be going to Charles Leclerc. But I mean, he's got one more chance to win it in Abu Dhabi. It's not happening. I'm just going to put that out there straight away. It's not happening. I think Max Verstappen will win it again. But and even I even say this as somebody who is not a fan of Red Bull. Even if Red Bull had won Singapore, I would actually be going into this final race rooting for Red Bull. Just like, you know what, just win the last race. Make you win every race in a season. Like, make some kind of history. You deserve it after this year. There's just nothing really that makes me excited for Abu Dhabi. Like, there's no jeopardy unless we get some kind of like Sergio Perez, Esteban Ocon kind of moments that they shared when they were teammates, kind of teammate on teammate drama, but it's just not going to happen, I don't think.
I think it's a season where the end is really long awaited. I mean, it almost felt like it ended races ago when we knew that Max was going to win, and it almost felt like he was parading every race. I think what we've just seen in Vegas was probably one of the better races of the season in terms of him being more involved, and it's nice to watch. I don't even mind that he won the race because it was just nice to watch more action and actually see him on the cameras instead of like them cutting to him just at the end of the race in the first 5 seconds, which tends to happen a lot on Sky. They sort of just forget he's there, and it does feel like a parade. Most of the races this season felt like it was a parade. You'd have Max 20 plus seconds ahead of everyone else and then just a bit of a mess really behind him. So it almost felt a little bit nicer in Vegas to see him competing with a couple other drivers, even though the outcome was the same. the actual way we got to it was different and way more interesting. So hopefully next season brings a lot more events like that. I think this season has been done for a very long time. I think the drivers, the fans, the teams, I think everybody clocked out a long time ago in terms of hoping for different results or predicting different results. I think that Vegas was a good sign of things to come, and hopefully that follows through into next season, whether it is, even if it is still Max winning, hopefully he has a little bit of competition just to make it more engaging and entertaining for fans.
Yeah, I also want to say as well, one thing I've noticed about Max Verstappen over the course of this season is when he's been challenged in some races, and it doesn't even have to be races he's won against, like Sergio Perez earlier on in the season, but when he's been challenged in races, I've noticed in his interviews after the races, he's looked a lot happier. And I just hope that we get to see more of that next season, because as much as I'm not a big fan of Max Verstappen, I used to be, but I'm not so much anymore. It's nice to see a race winner actually happy to win the races, because sometimes you just kind of, it gets to the Parc Ferme and he does the post-race interview and you just think, yeah, this is just going to be a standard Max, like, oh, really happy to win, thanks to the team for the great car again, on to the next one. And it's been the same throughout the season, but this weekend he very much seemed like he enjoyed it, because he got to race wheel to wheel with people, and I think that's what Max Verstappen loves about Formula 1, and hopefully for him and hopefully for us viewers we'll get to see that next season.
Well, it is like, it's sort of the heart inside these drivers that grew up karting, and they grew up, battling each other since they were kids, and of course they're going to want to race, wheel to wheel, round tight corners of each other, because that's how they grew up and that's how they did karting, that's what they fell in love with. I doubt any driver on the grid would love to be, 20 seconds ahead every single race. It must get boring, just being there by yourself and your thoughts. I know I'd get bored. And it's like, it's so nice for the fans, but also for the drivers. Of course, Max will love it when he's like close racing people. Lewis admitted that he loved it when he was racing people, and it can get quite lonely up at the front by yourself.
I think if you were Max Verstappen and you are this great driver, but no one ever gets to see your craft because the car is so fast that you don't actually get to show off your skill as a driver.
Definitely.
We know he's a good driver, but we rarely get to see him demonstrating that he's a good driver because the car brings him so far ahead that he's not actually competing with anyone. I think he, as Max Verstappen, you would sit there and think, people are actually watching and now understanding this is why I'm a good driver. They're seeing my talents, they're seeing my moves. He must almost be happy that people are seeing his craft. Maybe that's why he's happier in the interviews after the race, because people are seeing him demonstrating his skills as opposed to just parading out in front. I like to use that word. This really is how it feels. So yeah, maybe it is just nice. You don't see it in any other sport. Imagine in tennis, the other guy just doesn't show up and you're just hitting a ball at nothing. It really is just Formula 1 where you see this sort of lack of competition.
It's like we tennis where you just hit it at the wall. I mean, you guys are kind of lucky that you don't follow MotoGP, because earlier on in the season we had the world champion guy who was on by far a superior bike. He was actually complaining that the bike was too good, and that's why he crashed in one of the races, because he couldn't actually feel feel how it went. And we all kind of looked at him like, yeah, you can just say you made a mistake and be done with it. It's fine.
The car's so good, I had to crash.
The bike was so good. I just had to give everyone else a chance. Otherwise, I was winning by 30 seconds. We've still got a title fight in that. I'm looking forward to that this weekend. I say that through gritted teeth because it's basically done. There's 24 points, 21 points between the top two in that. But so my attention is going to be a bit diverted this weekend. But Formula 1 has been kind of done for a while now. But Max Verstappen is, very clearly the world champion again, very worthy champion, because he's been supreme this season. The car has been brilliant this season, and even in equal machinery, his teammates been nowhere near him. And there's always that debate, we've said it before here on this podcast about, could somebody else step in that Red Bull and challenge Max? I don't think so at the moment. I really don't, because that car and him, they're kind of one at the moment, and I don't think anybody else coming into that team will be able to adapt in that way, because Max's style is so aggressive.
Now, does anybody have any crazy predictions ahead of Abu Dhabi?
We were all wrong last week, weren't we? I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. I might recycle my prediction from last week and just be like, I say that my prediction last week was about the at least one car from each of the top teams not finishing. However, I think mine is kind of going to be the same, but a bit different. Go something like there's going to be at least 3 engine blow-ups because we've got to the end of the year and we're just tired and the car's
exhausted engines.
Yeah, it might not necessarily be the engine, it might be the gearbox, but there's going to be at least 3 technical problem DNFs, and I've just been sat here thinking about my prediction and I'm just like, I just know that one of the Ferraris is going to be one of them. I just know it. I feel it in my bones.
You've jinxed it now.
I'm going to say that Norris and Piastri are going to finish the race next to each other. Now, I don't know in what position that's going to be, at the front of the grid, the back of the grid, but they're going to finish next to each other.
Have a full circle moment, P19 and P20 for McLaren.
Bless him.
I'm their fan.
I would say either I'm going to go for Logan Sargent points because I think that's doable, and I'm also going to go with, in partnership with that, multiple retirements. I think, like you say, like there will be cars with engine blow-ups and people that they're tired. I think it may not even be an engine blow-up, they may just retire. I think someone is going to, someone halfway through the race is going to think, do you know what, this is just not worth it, and just retire.
I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
Mood.
I think it'll be an Aston Martin as well.
Fernando Alonso, he's 40 now,
Yeah.
just let him have a rest, Could be Lance Stroll, to be fair, with all the tennis rumours earlier on in the season, which was such a random thing to be reading. I was just back when I was getting in my tennis era again, and then seeing Lance Stroll is giving up F1 to be a tennis player. What?
It's like when Gareth Bale left Tottenham to go and play golf. It was very strange.
And now for your timings this weekend. On the 24th of November, you have practice 1 at 9:30 in the morning. And that is, I believe, has 10 stand-in drivers from other Formula Series.
Oh, yes. I believe Red Bull is actually made up of entirely junior drivers, which would be an interesting watch, I think, maybe.
And then practice 2 will be at 1 p.m.
On the Saturday, the 25th of November, we've got practice 3 starting your morning at 10:30, and then qualifying a bit later on, starting at 2.
And on the 26th of November, it is race day, and that gets started at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, UK time.
And don't forget, as always, you can reach us on at the F1 Era on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify and YouTube.
And if you'd like to contact us, you can contact us through the F1 Era and also on Twitter at Nerve Radio. Or you can email us at studio@nervemedia.org.uk.
We thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to catch up with you once again as we debrief what happens in Abu Dhabi this weekend.